Yo, what's up, everybody? I hope you guys are doing great, staying safe out there. Today, I am releasing the bumper bands 1-day 1DAI. These are the new trading bands for higher time frames, specifically right now for the 1-day time frame. You could try it on other time frames, but right now it's kind of more specifically designed for that. I will probably add some more features to it as we go. Here is the general equity curve on Bitcoin. Pretty freaking solid, especially over the last few years. See, there's some bumps early on here in the road when Bitcoin was just having massive runs up and down. But I think this is probably the last four. So this whole chart here is since 2012. You can see up here, right here, you can see year by year what's going on. Those are not completely perfect, exact percentage because each year is based on the previous year before and is compared to it. So, for example, this year it says plus 2%. But if I actually let's just kind of see real fast here what this year has done so far. 2025, I'm going to put this on 2025, January 1. Let's just see what's going on this year. Then we'll jump into the tool itself and I'll explain some of the details. So, yeah, more like 20% this year. Not bad at all. I mean, obviously had some runs up and down. Max drawdown says it's about 13%. It probably is a little bit higher, but not too much higher actually. That seems about right. So not bad. Profit factor pretty decent this year, 69, almost 70% profitable. So overall, yeah, pretty great. And if you go into the trade, just again this year, largest winning trade is 9%. Largest losing trade is interesting. It doesn't have, it does have percent right there, 5%. So yeah, generally, pretty great statistics. I think it's also important to look at the list of trades and to see the drawdown and look at your max drawdown just to know. And it shouldn't be much over 5% because of the stop loss. The stop loss is actually a limit stop loss at 5%. So the most you should see would be 5%. Now, some things that we could look at changing here is if you want to take on more risk and take off the max stop loss at 5%, over time, it generally is a little bit more profitable. Yeah, you can see it's definitely better, less drawdown. Now, again, that drawdown is not exactly accurate. We'll look at that in a second. Percent profitable goes way up to 77. Profit factor goes, up to almost 3%, which is, or not 3%, but a profit factor of 3, which is crazy. However, the last few trades you can see were worse, I believe. Let me undo that. I want to see where we're at. Yeah, okay. So we had one losing trade here recently, whereas if we take that off, I think it was a few losing trades in a row. Yeah. So that's what happens when you the trade-off. You have over a period of time, generally better, but some trades will be worse because you're not, stopping it. The other thing you can do, you can take off the ATR stop. Again, it's getting more and more risky the more things you take off, but it goes up even more. So now we're at 36%, 90. That's nuts. I have not done that yet, but this is definitely not what I would plan on forever. I think that's a bit lucky this year, but yeah, taking off. Place to stop out. I guess Bitcoin has been pretty bullish in general this year. So as long as you can stick through the drawdowns, you're all right. But speaking of drawdowns, let's look at that with only the emergency risk on. So this is you're getting real risky here because sometimes the bottom can fall out a bit more, and you don't know how far the ER risk is. I mean, at the beginning of every trade, you can kind of check, and if you have the style tab, if you have the lines on right here, you can see where your ER risk is going to be. So if you're trading this and watching it, you can kind of manage your risk a little bit better probably by seeing where your risk is actually at. I'm going to take those off just to clean the chart up a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of crazy this year though. Let's see. Let's look at the list of trades and see what the swings are. Because I'm going to look at max drawdown now because this is going to be telling of, especially if you're using leverage, how dangerous things can get. 8% kind of gnarly if you're using 3x leverage. That's about 24% of drawdown in your account in one trade. If you're using, again, if you're using 3, 4, 5x leverage, this would be at 5x leverage, that'd be, what would that be, 65, 70, 75? Is that 75? What's 5 times 14? I should know this. 50, and then 20. Yeah, gosh, that's 70, about 75. That's nuts. So something to really keep in mind. The trade only closes at a 3.5% loss, but if you're trading at 5x leverage, your account over the trade, nasty drawdown. So something to keep in mind. You have several of those. This would be about 55% drawdown if you're trading at 5x leverage. If you're not trading at hardly any leverage, like I would, something like this, a daily strategy, I might trade at 2x leverage with a little bit, like maybe I'm trading my holdings of Bitcoin. So I'm trading like perpetuals, having Bitcoin as the underlying asset and just trading at 2x leverage, trying to get the return of Bitcoin on top of it. Might not be bad, but use this at your own risk. And definitely I would recommend having some risk on. Let's just experiment here a little bit and see over the last, see how bad it gets if we give it a little bit more runway with, let's see, let's actually do 2020, let's do 2019 to now, just to kind of see how bad the drawdown could get. It says only 16%, but let's kind of look here at some of the earlier trades. Again, I'm going to go to list of trades and go early on and kind of just look at my drawdown here and just see what the worst would be. It's not bad for a while. Got 15% there again, which is high. Okay, yeah, there you go, 25%. So if you're trading at 5x leverage on this, you're liquidated. If you're trading at 4x leverage, you're liquidated without those. So that's, again, the trade closes at a massive loss, which is negative 16%. And yes, before it, you had few pretty huge trades that more than made up for it. But worst case scenario, start trading at the worst possible time, and you liquidate your account if you're not being careful. So this is what happens when you start taking risk off. Another 24% drawdown. So I would be 33% drawdown. Yeah. So if you're trading with these risks off, this is something that if you have not done in the past with trading strategies, I would definitely recommend going through and looking at your drawdown here and just seeing what you're getting in for, because all of these numbers are really scary. It looks amazing, when you look at like 400% since 2019. And sure, if you trade, let's kind of just do some fun stuff here. We're trading at, let's say 350%, which is 3.5% leverage. That could be like 4x leverage. It's nasty gains, obviously, but the drawdown is going to be so unrealistic. So let's just say you're trading at 2x leverage. That's a little more realistic for a strategy like this. And the other thing I talked about in another video I just did, you want your that's kind of crazy. Still pretty insane. You want your commission to be more reasonable. So the thing that you would want to do is go into trading analysis, look at your average number of bars and trades, which is 8. So that's going to be, you're going to have to add a funding rate to that, which is, I think it's 0.08 or something like that, plus your fee, your commission. So let's say let's be a little safer, and just say 0.2, more realistic. And I guess depends on what you're doing. If you're doing, so that all automatically your profit factor or your net profit goes down by like crazy amount, half. Your drawdown is really nasty. The chart looks great, obviously, but you're just gonna have some really nasty trades in there. Well, I already talked about this earlier, but you're gonna want to kind of look at your drawdown, put your realistic numbers in there. So whether you're trading at a percentage of your account, or say you're trading at 2x leverage, which would be 20,000 out of 10,000. That'd be 2x leverage, and just kind of see what your actual numbers would be, and I would say not your numbers in the good sense, but your numbers like how bad would it get if you actually trade it like you're gonna trade it. With risk off, it's like that. Let's put risk back on and just see what the difference is here. So I think it was like 800% ish. Yeah. So you don't go down. Listen, you only go down by like 130%, which is of course something, but your max drawdown is way better. You're protected in in way more scenarios. So depends on how risky you want to be. Maybe you just want to trade at 1x or 2x leverage, and you want to trade perpetuals or inverse perpetuals. It could be useful. Who knows? I'm just kind of pointing out some general ideas here and general things to take note of. So the strategy is super, super simple. It's just using the bands themselves, the enter and exit signals, and we'll jump into that in a second. Then it's using risk and take profit, and it's using a break-even stop loss, which when set at 1%, that means it's going to try to break even at 1%. So even a break-even trade will still be profitable. Kind of depends on the trade there. But yeah, okay, and then all the days on, everything like that. So let's jump into the indicator itself. So a new thing, this is supposed to be at 100. I was messing with that. The new parts of this indicator that are not in any other indicator yet is the bias, and you can see you got kind of version of bias and blend and all this stuff we'll talk about. So the bias basically means, and you can see the results if you just put let's put this down at 10. So the support band is going to be pulled lower. It's a bit like offset, but it uses just a way more advanced algorithm and kind of some AI ideas in the code. So it's kind of pulling. It's not going to be super useful to put the bias that low. And the resistance bias, it has even less effect, and I'll talk about that later. But it depends on the asset you're trading. If you are trading maybe much more volatile asset, you can put it way lower. And this also, the weight and the blend will influence this a bit as well. So you have a whole lot of control over this indicator, and you can make a pretty great strategy on hopefully most any asset as long as it has some good history. Like altcoins probably won't be great for this because they don't have a whole lot of history. But the general idea is you're kind of looking at each layer here, and the bias is pulling it towards, depends on the weight. So if you have a high weight, this layer has a lot more effect than if you have less weight, and then the bias either pulls the bands lower or higher. We're gonna look at this area, and then I'll jump into more weight and blend. The band constraints, because the daily time frame, it's much. I don't know what the word is. It's much more. It's much less dynamic in the sense of in a hourly time frame you have a whole lot of fluid movement, and the daily it feels very blocky. Especially, when you're thinking, obviously, a day is a huge period of time, and a lot happens during a day. So this helps the bands stay pushed apart and separated, because sometimes you'll get, when price action, dramatically increases or decreases, you might get the bands like that kind of pull and cross over each other, which I don't necessarily want to happen. Sometimes it actually gives good results because it can give you more trending trades even. So if the bands are, you can see when the bands are really, really close together, that means it's way more of a trending action. So you might, want to take the band constraints off and actually let more trades happen. Let's actually look and see 694. So I think, it might even make it makes it a little bit better, but it also makes the drawdown worse. I have your little tooltips here you can read, and I found that generally these are pretty good settings. Max percent above open just means it won't let the bands, like if the candle like this one just has a massive daily candle, it won't let the support band be pulled too high. Especially earlier on in Bitcoin's history, it's less of an issue now, where Bitcoin was moving like crazy amounts in one day. The support band was just getting thrown around really, really hard, and so that kind of constrains the support band specifically to not be pulled around as much. You can put it on 0 or whatever you want to, or you can even disable this altogether. Separation weight means that it spreads out the band separation percent more evenly to the support and the resistance band. So 0 means it's only affecting support. If you have it on 1, it's only affecting resistance, which means it's pushing the resistance higher, depending on the band separation. So times like this where the bands almost touch, if you have this on like 1%, it's going to push the resistance. It's going to push the support now. It's going to push the support down. And that's actually interesting that it didn't. I guess it's because it's on smooth. We could do hard cap. Yeah, which pushes the bands apart a little bit harder. And then, if you want it to be crazy, the thing is, it's not. I think I capped it at like 5 or something. Because it's not really that helpful. Yeah, once you push it apart too much, the bands apart too much, it's not quite as helpful. I mean, listen, I guess that's not bad, but you have. Actually, that's interesting. You have a low amount of trades. You have a pretty decent drawdown, but less profit. Yeah, I don't know. That might be something that's worth messing with. Decently high profit factor, but it just doesn't take like it missed a ton of trades in here. It didn't take trades in here because that actually would have been a very nice trade if it didn't get stopped out. Anyway, something interesting to kind of mess with. I probably wouldn't run it, at extreme numbers, but do with it what you will. And, I just would rather have more trades going on than less, just to get more data points. If you only have like 100 or 150 trades, to me, that's not a whole lot of data to actually pull from to know this is actually being helpful. All right, spend enough time on that. The weight, I think I mentioned this earlier, but it determines how much this support layer or the resistance layer, if you're on that, affects the overall band, the support or resistance band itself. The blend is how much it blends with the other bands themselves, or how much it blends with the other bands. And it pulls, like I said here, it pulls either towards the lowest value as determined by the other layers, or it pulls towards its actual value, or it pulls towards the higher band layers. It's I don't really want to get into explaining it all right now because it's not actually that important to know. Like, you can understand perfectly all of the intricacies of it and still not be able to make a strategy. So what's really important is, and the way that I think about when I'm making strategies is I just start messing with numbers and kind of seeing how it affects the actual chart. So if I put this at 10, I'll look at how it affects the actual results, and then I'll start, messing around with length, because sometimes maybe 10 might work if you have it also on a lower weight and a different length and different offset. Kind of depends on what you're aiming for. If you're aiming for smaller drawdown, or you're aiming for the best P&L, or you're aiming for the best profit factor, you can kind of, dial in the bands a little bit more for those specific things. If you make, some more changes based on that and kind of watch. I think it's always important to watch the overall equity curve of the bands, even if you're, dialing it in more for, say you're dialing it in more for profit factor. But if you have a super high profit factor but hardly any trades and, really bad drawdown or whatever, to me it's not worth it. So all of it comes with balance. Yeah, that's enough about that. I wonder, did that actually, that did only affected the bands a little bit, but then you have your general, length and offset and type for each layer, and that's all, kind of the same as the other bands have been. Then you have your validation, which is again similar to what we have in the other bands. I think none of this stuff is new from the other bands, so I don't want to spend too long on that, but basically, this, based on previous price action, will help you push the bands closer or further to price action, depending on what previous price action has done. And you got your offset and what you consider a trigger to make that offset happen. So all that is, I think I explained it in another video, but again, the best way to kind of wrap your head around this is start watching what it actually does. I could sit here and explain it all day, and it'll probably still be kind of confusing until you start messing around with it and watching what happens. And you can read the tooltip. I try to make that helpful. So like this is looking at the close of price. This is looking at if you're saying, less than support or less than or greater than midline or resistance or anything. So you're basically comparing the close to the band itself. You can have some historical bars, which looks backwards at price, and condition memory, which looks forward. You can have your evaluation mode, which applies to the historical bars. So and means if you have it on 3, and means that all 3 bars have to be true, or means any of the 3 have to be true, and first means the first of the 3 have to be true. So anyway, yeah, okay, that's all that. This is for the resistance bands. I don't have anything enabled on this, but if you want to try to get different kinds of trades, you can mess with the resistance band as well. Vitality, filter, short-term and long-term trend, all the same as the other indicators. It just looks at the band width and trending price, vitality in price, which is kind of volatility S kind of thing in price, as measured by the bands. And then you have your all the settings here, which are a lot of settings. Yeah, I probably should make this simpler, but as of right now, it's all kind of helpful to have. So if this overwhelms you, I would say take it one section at a time and don't worry about any of these settings here until you slowly learn how to use the bands. And yeah, because there's a ton of settings in this one indicator. It makes it super useful. And again, all of these settings are kind of doing very small tweaks, very small things, but the way I kind of do it is if I'm making a strategy on a new asset is I really, really simplify, take all this stuff off and just start with the basics, start with the general band settings here, and then get my strategy as good as I can, and then slowly start adding more to it. I mean, you can see here, if I take off all the settings, we have a ton of trades here in the last 6 years, a ton of trades for a daily, which is very high time frame. It's even like decently profitable, but it's not great. And then as you start adding more to it, it'll start getting a little bit more profitable and all of that stuff. So I'm gonna go on. Okay, yeah, and we got the signals here, which just are these green and red signals. You got your filter information, which is gosh, that is I forgot it. That's a super long explanation for what's going on in this table right here. I probably should call that show filter table or something like that. But and then you got your smoothing and your offset here. Some things that can yield interesting results is taking your smoothing up and changing the type of smoothing for a starting place, and then kind of building backwards from there. So you probably won't get great things right off the bat, but you might be able to kind of work your way backwards. Start with a general setting here, and then try to build the bands and build the support and resistance layers with that on. And then you got your midline settings, as is the case with all the other bands as well. So, okay, hopefully this was not too confusing and helpful for those. Oh, I need to put this back on. 100 is what it's supposed to be on. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful for users out there, and you enjoy the bands and the tools. Another thing, again, that's kind of cool about this indicator is you have the band proximity, which allows you to go into bar replay and kind of look at, what might have happened. Let's look at, let's even go for an hourly. And let this load real fast here. And this will kind of give you where you're at in general price action compared to the bands and what it's meant in the past. So, for example, like the band proximity would have been pretty high right here. Would not have been a bad place to buy. You can see it had a nice pullback. Same thing with here. Now, that's not always the case, because there will be places that you, like this, you have massive breakdowns. And so the band proximity would also have been pretty high here. Now, this would have been an incredible place to buy. Again, if you're going a little bit more for scalps, but this would have been a kind of bad place to buy. It would have taken you, like 5 or 6 days to be back at break even. So you have to have a way to kind of think about, measuring actually getting in and out of trades. But if you want to, kind of use the band replay trading and kind of watch your band proximity here, when it kind of breaks down below the bands a bit, it will give you some signals here, and you can. So that's B72, B90. When it gets into the 90s, generally, a lot of times, not always, and that's the thing you have to reckon with, is it's a bouncing point. And so can be useful for those traders who want to be sitting at their computer and kind of watching all the stats right there. Okay, I'm going to leave it off there. Hopefully you guys have found or will find this tool useful. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions on it. I'll see you guys next time.